Good evening, everybody. We are starting with our next session. May I call upon stage Dr. Abhay Khode sir, Dr. Simple Kothari, and Dr. Raju Sethi to chair the session.
आवाज नहीं We are starting with the sessions of the diabetes and cardiovascular disease. For the first talk, I invite Dr. Vijay Neglor. He is talking on the challenging diabetes cases. These are two cases he will be talking.
Can I start, sir? Thank you. Thank you for your kind words of introduction, Chairperson. Thank you, Dr. Unni Krishnan, for this invitation. And my job is to discuss with you the unusual, challenging cases in diabetes that I've seen. These are my own cases, and I'm presenting them the way I have worked them up. And therefore, may not be absolutely right, but how to approach a given case is what I have seen in these patients. And therefore, before we start seeing any patients, I think we should listen to William Osler, the student of life, the father of medicine, who's taught everything about medicine. He says, read with only two objectives. First, to acquaint yourself with the current knowledge of the subject and the steps by which it has reached. And secondly, and more important, read to understand and analyze your cases. I think that's the correct way. We should analyze our cases. And this is how I'm going to tell you the first patient. He is Mr. PV, who's 29 years old, actually came for fitness for surgery. He had diabetic retinopathy, and therefore his request was that he wanted a fitness for surgery. He's 29 years old male, diabetes since 2 years, on metformin sulfonylurea. He's poorly controlled with random sugar of 357. He had floaters in the eyes, flash of light, especially at night when he was driving. He had his recent hospitalization for upper abdominal pain, where OGD-scopy was done, and it was detected to have H. pylori, for which he took 2 weeks treatment of metronidazole, clarithromycin, and PPIs. He had history of 3 months back fever, dengue fever, which was diagnosed by NS1 positive. NS1 stands for non-structural protein. And he was stated in the hospital for 3 to 4 days, and then he was discharged when he was afebrile. He came with a history of generalized weakness and 3 months, and he ascribes this to the episodes of dengue fever. There's a family history of diabetes in the father and the grandfather at the very young age. And this is the pedigree of the family history, and this is the patient, which is the only son of these two parents. His mother and the grandfather had history of diabetes. His maternal uncle also had history of diabetes. And clinical diagnosis based on this, which I thought when I saw the patient for the first time, is whether this is Modi with diabetic retinopathy, especially Modi 12 variety, which comes very early, because there's 2 years history of diabetes, and he already has retinopathy. So it's possible that could be some other unusual type of diabetes, and Modi 12 is notoriously known for retinopathy much early in the game. That's possible. Post-viral asthenia, because he completed a marked weakness. Dengue-induced neuropathy and retinopathy is well known. When you have history of dengue fever, these two can present with neuropathy and retinopathy. And post-H. pylori gastritis, B12 deficiency, along with, of course, metformin, which he was taking, is again a possibility. And lastly, whether it's just diabetic peripheral neuropathy. So with that in mind, I evaluated this patient further. I got in a detailed history, like what we taught to us, like ODP. The patient had difficulty in getting up from squatting position for the last 3 months. And last 2 months, he's got slippers slipping out of his feet. And he has difficulty in changing the gears of his bike. He had tingling numbness and paresthesia at both lower limbs. He had erectile dysfunction. He had a bladder symptoms. He had GI symptoms of bloated feeling and constipation. Actually, for that, he underwent the ogidoscopy. Since last month, he had difficulty in tearing rotis also, and had buttoning and his clothes and holding the objects very firmly. Last 7 to 8 days, he has difficulty in climbing the stairs and cannot get up from his bed without assistance. In other words, he has a disease which is very progressive. So everything suggests there's a progressive disease. And based on this, what are the possibilities this patient had, or probability this patient has? The first thing I thought it could be a spinal cord lesion because he has a bladder involvement and he had a sensory motor quadriparesis with bladder symptoms. It could be myeloneuropathy because of, say, betryl deficiency, especially with metformin, called subacute combined degeneration is also a possibility. Third, SMON, subacute myelopathic neuropathy, which was described by Vadia in 1971, which is Mexaform, or those drug which is taken for chronic diarrheas. Of course, there was no history of that. Neuropathy, simply patient has, or a myopathy because he had a proximal weakness, he has a waddling gait. So these are the possibilities which could be there in these patients. So the examination of this patient revealed that vitals were stable, there's a mild pallor. Otherwise, there was only abdominal symptoms of bloating, epigastric tenderness, liver was enlarged, otherwise nothing else, no free fluid. The cranial nerves were normal, he had a diminished vision, and if you look at his fundi, on the left fundus, he had a subhyaloid mild hemorrhage, and he also had a neovascularization on the right eye. And his tone was decreased in all the limbs. He had a proximal weakness in upper limbs of grade 4, and a grade 3 in the lower limbs. His Gower sign was positive, which suggests the patient has a proximal muscle weakness, and he had a foot drops on both the sides. This is what the examination-wise. And the CNS examination further showed that the sensory modalities decrease of pain and touch, 30 to 40% in both lower limbs. Joint position sense and vibration also decreased in ankles. His reflex is absent in all the 4 limbs. His plantars were flexors. His gait is a high stepping gait with waddling, and he had no cerebellar signs and no sensory ataxia. This is what the examination finding was. Now, based on this, what are the differential diagnoses he could be having? So one, it could be a spinal cord is unlikely because his reflex is absent and the plantars are downgoing. So that rules out the possibility of spinal cord lesion. Subacute combined degeneration must have sensory ataxia. This patient does not have sensory ataxia, so that also rules out this possibility. Then myopathy possible, but the absent reflexes goes against the diagnosis. In myopathy, the reflex is always preserved. It's only neuropathy, the reflex is absent. And the neuropathy is the most likely diagnosis because he has areflexia. That was the diagnosis only on the clinical findings. All so far, what I've done is a clinical examination. Okay, the investigation revealed he had a mild pallor. His platelet count was less. He had history of dengue about 3 months ago. His platelet count still less. His BT, CT, PT, and APTT was all normal. His sugars were not controlled. A1C was 10.7%. He has a mild elevation of OTPT, and his cholesterol was a little higher side. He UHC showed fatty liver. So nothing else but dyslipidemia and dysglycemia, and the low platelet was only the basic investigation. The further investigations we did, it was showing the B12 level was normal. His 25-hydroxy D3 level was quite low. CPK was also normal. C-peptide, GAD65, islet antibodies, and insulin-associated protein 2 antibodies all negative. Genetic testing for Modi report is still not available with me. It is sent for evaluation, but it is not available. HLA-B20 was negative, HIV also was negative. MRI cervical spine was normal. CSF was done, also was normal. NCV, nerve conduction velocity, showed prolonged distal latencies, significantly reduced sensory and motor action potentials, significantly reduced conduction velocities, all suggested the patient has a demyelinating polyneuropathy. So what was certain, this patient has neuropathy. That is obviously sure. We also did this was actually a report which I got it from ophthalmic surgeon, and the fluorescent angio was done, which again showed that Modi 12 variety is notoriously known to have this kind of a retinopathy much early in the game. If you look at patients' history of diabetes, retinopathy, neuropathy comes much later, after 10 years, okay? But here, within 2 years of diabetes, he already had these many signs in the eyes, and therefore whether this is due to retinopathy because of diabetes or it's a dengue fever itself which can cause retinopathy was a question. We were confused whether in 2 years he could get so many manifestations in retina, or everything was because of dengue fever. That was what was the question. So therefore, what is certain, this patient has patient neuropathy. That is for sure, that is certain, both objectively and by examination, and of course the investigation showed there's a evidence of neuropathy. Is it related to diabetes is the question that we should answer, or is it because of dengue or H. pylori? When I looked into literature of dengue fever, which also presents as retinopathy and a neuropathy, which picture very similar to Guillain-Barré disease, is well known, well described in dengue fever. The report has come from northern part of India, which is called Dr. Ravindra Garg. He has presented about 600 patients, and he saw about 10 to 12% of evidence in these patients presenting as polyneuropathy or radiculomyeloneuropathy who had a dengue fever. H. pylori is also known to be associated with these manifestations, though the data is very sparse. But of course, it's possible. And both these things exist in this patient. And the way the patient is always ascribing his symptoms to the progression of the disease following the episode of dengue fever, because he has diabetes for 2 years. But everything picked up from 3 months onwards. So whether it's possible, whether what we're dealing is purely because of diabetes manifestation, or whether it is a part and parcel of a dengue disease which he suffers from. So therefore, whether it's a GBS, this is what we have to think of. So dengue and GBS, the occurrence is well known. As I mentioned about Dr. R.K. Garg from Lucknow, he has seen about 600 patients, and 10% of the neurological manifestations in dengue can present as GBS, and it can come following the episode of dengue fever, so it's possible, or it's everything triggered by infection of Campylobacter jejuni or H. pylori. It's possible because of that. So therefore, when you think of CIDP in a patient of diabetes, it is 11 times common in a diabetic patient. It's a primary demyelinating changes on the nerve conduction velocity, suspect CIDP, and CIDP is a treatable condition, hence should always be considered and ruled out in a suspected case because we have a drug to offer to these patients. So what is the diagnostic criteria of a CIDP in a diabetes? It's a progressive proximal distal weakness, sensory dysfunction of all the 4 limbs which this patient had, and the duration is 8 weeks, this patient has 3 months, so it fits in that, and absent or reduced tendon reflex is also there. And the supportive diagnosis, the albuminous-cytokine dissociation, which also was in these patients, and MRI showed enhancement of chorda equina, but this patient did not have that, and nerve biopsy we could not do, which is classically called as onion bulb appearance, which was okay, we could not do that. So red flags that you should see in diabetic neuropathy is it's subacute onset, rapidly progressive, remitting relapsing, prominent motor proximal involvement in early stages, and disproportionate large fiber abnormalities. Involvement of the entire lower limbs without neuropathy of the upper limbs is what are the red flags that you see in a diabetic patients when they present to you as neuropathy. So therefore, what is the final word? What is the answer in this patient? What is the final diagnosis? This patient has CIDP, okay, and has retinopathy, all right? Whether it's dengue as a causative agent or it's MODY-12. No, don't have the report of MODY-12 as of now, but then dengue is definitely, could be one of the cause in this patient. So I personally believe everything came so early, so suddenly, and such a dramatic presentation, and he did respond well to IVIG treatment, and therefore I personally believe that this could be a manifestation of dengue rather than diabetes. The next patient that I have is the 31 years old IT professional from this city, Pune, and he is not known diabetic. He had severe tinnitus in the left ear, 2 to 3 days in the month of June last year. There was no history of coryza, otorrhea, fever, rash, or vomiting. He consulted ENT surgeon, and there was 90% hearing loss audiometry when the ENT surgeon examined him, and he prescribed him antihistaminics, cinnarizine, steroids, and IV piracetam. This was the drug prescribed by him. Patient took 40 milligrams of prednisolone for 30 days. 3 weeks later, he felt there was little better in the hearing. 60% of the hearing loss improved on 1st of July, 2019. And patient developed severe headache, left occipital, temporal, and orbital pain with severe epiphora. And patient had history of diabetes in the family, but patient himself was not diabetic. And this is what the patient came with. He was drowsy state, red left eye with marked periorbital left ear pain, ptosis and diplopia on looking towards the left. He had vomiting, he had mild fever, sought opinion of ophthalmic surgeon, ENT surgeon, who said immediately admit this patient to ICU. When this patient was admitted in ICU, he was drowsy, febrile. There was tachycardia, there was a little drop in the pressure, respiration was 24. There's a marked ecchymosis of the left conjunctiva with a bloody discharge of the left nostril, congestion with blood discharge. There are no meningeal signs. There was ptosis on the left eye, and he had a diplopia looking to the left. Other systems were normal. And what is the diagnosis this patient had? First, I thought it's a bacterial cellulitis, whether it could be cavernous sinus thrombosis, whether it's rapidly growing orbital tumor, aspergillosis, or whether it's a mucormycosis. This is what thoughts came to my mind when I saw this patient. The evaluation showed that 22,000 WBC count, ESR of 88, and sugar fasting 300, and a prandial of 500. Patient is not known diabetic. He was given steroid for 1 month, and A1C of 7.2%. There was a ketone in the urine, and OTPT was mildly elevated, creatinine also slightly higher side. Electrolytes were normal. The blood gases also showed little acidosis, and the ECG was normal. This was the X-ray that we could get because patient was too ill. We managed to get, which showed there was a haziness in the left maxilla, which could suggest a sinusitis. That's all. We did rhinoscopy, and rhinoscopy got the disease out. And the patient can see very well the black eschar. And the patients underwent surgical debridement. And you can see on the right the biopsy report, which shows that there are hyphae which are at the right angle to each other, suggesting this patient had mucormycosis. And therefore we gave injection amphotericin B 10 vials per day, oral posaconazole and capsofungin was all given this patient from 1st of July to 27th of July. Patient was in the hospital, and that is this drug was given. Patient discharged on 27/7 and continued treatment till 12th of August last year. I said we continue same treatment. Patient was fine, absolutely fine. On 21st August, 2 weeks after the patient said he was fine, patient had a vasovagal episode while brushing the teeth and had a profuse epistaxis. Epistaxis could not be controlled by packing both anterior and posterior. The ENT surgeon was desperately struggling to put the packing, could not control. His hemoglobin dropped to 5.5. WBC again 16,000. BT-PT CT were normal, and the anemia was corrected by Paxil. The ENT opinion was taken. ENT fellow said, I can't handle this. You call interventional radiologist. So interventional radiologist came into picture. He said, this patient has a profuse bleeding. This could be an invasion of an artery on the septum of the nose, and it requires intervention. So he said, we'll have to do intervention in this patient. So we put a microcatheter, cannulation was done, and we found out it was a bleeding coming from left splenopalatine artery. It was an active bleeder from that artery was bleeding profusely, and so much of the patient came into shock. And we embolized using PVA, polyvinyl alcohol. Particles are now being used now, off late. This is in the past we were using the blood particles, now we're using polyvinyl alcohol. This particle is used to complete closure of the artery and even the pseudoaneurysm. And with that, the patient's bleeding stopped and patient became all right. This is the MRI we did after the surgery because we had no time at that time to do all MRI because patient was so critically ill. We need to treat the patient urgently. The ENT surgeon came to our rescue. He did the scopy and tried to debridge as much as possible and could get out. And this patient now came to me late on 28th of last month with severe allodynia. Very severe. He could not touch his feet. The moment he touched his feet, he to really shout. He's saying, I can't bear this pain. And at the time, sugar was not badly controlled. His A1C was 8%, but fasting PP was reasonably okay. He was basal bolus insulin therapy. The clinical features of peripheral neuropathy were present. So I felt whether it's possible diabetes is causing this, whether there's a long-term use of antifungal drug which is possibly responsible. I looked into literature whether amphotericin B, such a long-term therapy, can cause neuropathy. There is some evidence, but not very common. Or whether itself, because of the disease the patient suffered, he was so ill, almost brought back to life. He was almost dead patient, brought back to life, young patient, and whether it is all the illness that he suffered, but that is the cause of peripheral neuropathy. It's possible, any of these is possible, but patient did respond to the treatment symptomatically and felt better. But point is that why I present this case, the way he presented, with just tinnitus and 1 month steroid therapy, brought out the infection of mucormycosis, which I think quite rare. I think this is the third patient I've seen with mucormycosis. And then we had to go through such a hurricane episode and eventually had a bleeding which required intervention by intervention radiologist. And therefore with that now patient is fine. And now he said, he's himself the IT personnel, he was looking into literature of the mucormycosis. He said the sale of amphotericin B has increased by 70% in last 5 years. That means that much number of fungal infections also probably rising. Probably we're not diagnosing or we're not seeing these patients that often. With that, I think I conclude my talk. Thank you very much. I have 1 minute left, 1 minute 22 seconds. If there are any questions.
Any questions from the audience? Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, now we'll go on to the next talk. The next talk is heart failure in diabetes, what's new for the diabetologist. Now we all know that patients with diabetes have a more than twofold increased risk of developing heart failure, and the morbidity, mortality and cardiovascular outcomes in patients with heart failure, those who have diabetes, are worse than patients those who don't have diabetes. You know, there are a lot of medicines which are beneficial in patients with diabetes and heart failure, like the SGLT2 inhibitors, and there are some medicines which are detrimental. Till last year, in the management of patients with heart failure and reduced ejection fraction, we had what we call as triple foundation therapy with beta blockers, ACE inhibitors or ARNI, and mineralocorticoid antagonists. But last year, in the ESC Congress, when the paper on DAPA-HF was presented, where dapagliflozin showed beneficial outcomes over and above that achieved with triple therapy, now we can say that time has come probably to move from triple foundational therapy to quadruple therapy. And to shed more light on this important topic, we have a very prominent cardiologist from Bombay, Dr. C.K. Ponde.